Sarah Baartman. A Body Made a Battleground, an EFG Africa historical documentary. Before the names were written by colonizers, before the labels, the measurements, the mocking laughter, there was a woman. Her name was Sarah Baartman. She was not a spectacle. She was not an object. She was not a scientific sample. She was a black woman, born into a world that would one day decide her body did not belong to her. This is not a story about curiosity. This is a story about power. This is a story about how colonialism, racism, and sexism combined to turn black women's bodies into battlegrounds, and how their echoes still shape the world today. Sarah Baartman was born around 1789 in the Eastern Cape of what is now South Africa, among the Khoikhoi people, a community with deep spiritual, cultural, and ecological knowledge of the land. Her birth name is believed to have been Sarchi, meaning Little Sarah, a name of familiarity, of care, of belonging. Before colonial intrusion, Khoikhoi societies held complex social systems. Women worked, loved, laughed, labored, and lived fully human lives, not as symbols, not as measurements, but as people. But colonial expansion was already tightening its grip. Dutch settlers had invaded the Cape. Land was seized, livestock stolen, communities displaced, violence normalized. Sarah's early life was shaped by this brutal disruption. Historical records suggest her parents were killed during colonial conflict. She was left vulnerable in a society already fractured by invasion. Colonialism does not begin with chains. It begins with erasure. By her teenage years, Sarah Baartman was working as a servant in a settler household. Her body, particularly her steatopegia, a genetic trait involving fuller hips and buttocks common among some Khoisan women, became the focus of obsessive attention by Europeans. What was normal within her culture was exoticized, sexualized, and dehumanized by colonial eyes. In Europe, a dangerous idea was spreading, that black bodies existed on a lower rung of humanity. Science, religion, and empire conspired to justify this belief, and black women bore the heaviest weight. Their bodies were framed as hypersexual, primitive, excessive, animalistic. Sarah Baartman's body became a canvas upon which white supremacy painted its lies. In 1810, Sarah Baartman was taken to London. Whether she consented to the journey remains deeply contested. Legal documents claimed she agreed. But consent under coercion, poverty, and power imbalance is not freedom. She arrived not as a guest, but as an exhibit. She was advertised as the Hottentot Venus. The name alone tells the story. Hottentot, a racial slur. Venus, a grotesque sexual parody. On stage, Sarah was forced to stand, turn, bend, and be inspected. Crowds paid to stare. They laughed. They pointed. They measured. Black womanhood was turned into entertainment.
From the dust of the first morning, from the breath of the ancestors, a name rises. A story returns. Remember her name, remember her true, was taken, still walks with us, through broken time, through stolen years, her spirit stands, her voice is here. We call her home, we call her home, we call her human.
The colonial gaze is not neutral. It does not observe. It consumes. European audiences did not see Sarah Baartman. They saw a fantasy they had created to confirm their superiority. Her humanity threatened the lie of racial hierarchy, so they stripped it away. Scientific men sketched her body. Anthropologists debated her anatomy. Doctors reduced her to diagrams. This was not science. This was racist mythology dressed as knowledge. Black women's bodies became proof, not of truth, but of prejudice. Sarah Baartman's suffering existed at the intersection of race and gender. Black men were dehumanized as labor. Black women were dehumanized as flesh. Colonial ideology portrayed black women as always sexually available, unable to feel pain the same way, morally inferior. These lies justified sexual violence, medical abuse, public humiliation. Sarah was not only racialized, she was sexualized beyond consent. Her body was never allowed rest. After London, Sarah was taken to Paris. There, her exploitation deepened. She lived in poverty. She was controlled. She was isolated. French scientists, including Georges Cuvier, fixated on her body. When Sarah Baartman died in 1815, at approximately 26 years old, her violation did not end. Her body was dissected. Her skeleton, brain, and genitals were preserved and displayed in museums. Even in death, she was denied dignity. For over 160 years, Sarah Baartman's remains were kept in France. Visitors walked past her body parts as educational artifacts. What does it mean when a society can only learn from black women by owning them? Colonialism teaches domination as knowledge, and museums became temples of stolen bodies. Sarah Baartman's story did not end in 1815. It echoes in the policing of black women's bodies. Beauty standards that shame fullness, medical bias against black women's pain, media hypersexualization, from enslaved women on plantations, to modern celebrities criticized for the same features once mocked on Sarah. The gaze remains. Only the language has changed. In the late 20th century, South Africa demanded Sarah Baartman's return. After years of resistance, France finally agreed. In 2002, her remains were laid to rest. A funeral, a homecoming, a reckoning. But remembrance alone is not justice. Sarah Baartman is not a symbol of shame. She is a mirror. Her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. How knowledge was built on suffering, how beauty was weaponized, how black women were made visible only through violation to honor her. We must do more than tell her story. We must change the world that made it possible. Say her name slowly. Sarah Baartman. Not as an exhibit, not as a myth, not as a lesson detached from the present, but as a woman whose body carried the weight of empire and whose legacy demands truth. She was never meant to be remembered this way, but she must never be forgotten. Sarah Baartman's body carried the weight of empire, yet her humanity outlived the lies that tried to erase it. History did not wound Sarah Baartman alone. It wounded generations. What was taken from her was more than dignity. It was the right to exist without explanation. Today, we return her name to the earth, and in doing so, we ask the world to unlearn what empire taught it. Because remembrance is not enough. Restoration is the work. To remember her is not to look again. It is to see differently. And until black women's bodies are no longer questioned, measured, or owned, this history is not past. It is present. If this story moved you, like this film, subscribe to EFG Africa and help us continue restoring the histories that were silenced. An original EFG Africa documentary, restoring dignity, reclaiming history, centering black truth,